Hi guys, George here from Zero Period Productions, and welcome back to The Road to Blackwood, a mini-series of videos leading up to the release of the Blackwood chapter for the Elder Scrolls Online. Last time we took an in-depth look at Companions, which stands to be a really fun addition to ESO, both in regards to new content and in the rest of the game. Today, we're taking a look at Leyawiin, one of the cities in the Imperial Province of Cyrodiil, and our main hub in the Blackwood Zone. The last time we saw the city of Leyawiin was back in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, set at the tail end of the Third Era. The Elder Scrolls Online takes place during the height of the Second Era, 800 years prior, so the city will be a mix of familiar layouts and structures, as well as some new features and areas. One important note is that there will not be any spoilers for the upcoming expansion, so you don't have to worry about that in this video. This video is strictly focused on exploring the city itself, and even comparing it to how it appeared back in Oblivion. Leyawiin is a southeastern seaport in Cyrodiil, sitting atop the Niben River, in the swamps and bogs that extend all the way to the Argonian homeland of Blackmarsh itself. Given its proximity to the Argonian province, Leyawiin's population is largely made up of Imperials and Argonians, two races with very different cultures. Part of the Blackwood chapter will be a matter of exploring this cultural divide, both in the city itself and throughout the rest of the zone. Looking at the overhead map for Leyawiin, both in ESO and in Oblivion, we can see that they've really kept the layout of the city largely the same. The two notable changes are the different layout of homes and buildings, as well as the addition of docks. The devs had said that during the Third Era, the Blackwood region fell victim to excessive flooding, and having ESO set hundreds of years prior means being able to explore not just the docks, but expanding other parts of the city as well. From a player standpoint, having a dock allows for more avenues of travel to and from other zones. From a design perspective, having the dock brings another element to the city, and helps it feel more alive with the hustle and bustle. And from a lore perspective, the docks serve as a crucial means of trade, and is what would allow Leyawiin to maintain its seat as a major trade hub in the Topol Bay region. Part of designing a hub city in ESO means having to include certain features, from guild traders to crafting stations, bankers, and various merchants. This is something that works to the advantage of the devs, as it means knowing that each hub city has to have a certain level of services and characters. It helps to make some of the cities feel more alive, and ensure that they have that guaranteed level of functionality. Entering through the western gate, just past the stables, we're immediately met with a series of houses on our left and ahead of us, and the Chapel of Zenithar on our right. The chapel is the tallest building in the entire city and can be seen from a distance in the surrounding area. I immediately noticed that the city felt much more pristine and even elegant. Engraved lampposts, more greenery, and less worn-down stone walls and buildings overall. The chapel sports large panes of stained glass, not unlike its Third Era counterpart, although ESO's looks much cleaner and much more colorful. Shrines to the 8 divines fill out the chapel itself, with the statue of Zenithar sitting at the far end. The chapel's interiors is a mix of old and new. It has a familiar layout, but it feels more elegant overall. This was one thing I noticed about ESO's version of Leyawiin in general, a certain level of elegance that was missing in Oblivion's. While Leyawiin might not be on the same level as the Imperial City, it is still a major city in the province of Cyrodiil, and serves as the main city of its county. It should have a certain level of elegance, which I think is really represented well in ESO. From carpeting, banners, intricate patterns on doors, and some really beautifully designed furniture. And across all of Leyawiin, there seems to be more houses, larger buildings, and less empty space to really make the city feel much more lived in. In Oblivion, a notable part of Leyawiin was its bright houses. Yellows, greens, reds, you name it. In ESO, we still see this variation in colors, but they're much more muted this time around, allowing for some variation in the buildings, but without being as vibrant and in your face. To me, this is a really nice change, as Leyawiin in Oblivion felt almost cartoonish at times because of that bright color scheme. Leyawiin's banner, featuring its white stallion, can be found throughout the city, and helps add a little bit of color to the otherwise gray city walls, and helps to establish the city's identity a bit more. The Colovian Inn, directly across from the chapel itself, comes somewhat close to the placement of the Three Sisters Inn in Oblivion, but sports a significantly different interior and layout. The Three Sisters Inn in Oblivion shared the same layout as other buildings in Leyawiin, including the Mages Guild and Fighters Guild, whereas the Colovian Inn has its own unique layout. It feels more lively with more seating for patrons, much more decoration, and a more open floor plan. Like the Three Sisters Inn, Colovian is 3 stories tall, but the top floor sports a fairly open library and lounge, as well as a door leading to a balcony looking out to the city, and looking directly upon the chapel. The inn, as well as many other buildings in Leyawiin, sport a mixture of different textures, from wood and plaster walls to exposed brick, which creates a nice contrast and range of design as you go from floor to floor. Moving further south into the city, we're met by a slew of buildings, as well as different market stalls and shops. The Mages Guild has a new layout and feels very warm and welcoming, with tall bookshelves and even a small study. The guild hall really feels like a place home to plenty of research and experiments. Further south, we have more shops, the Way Shrine, the city's crafting stations, and the Fighters Guild. Entering the Fighters Guild, you're met with a large Imperial statue, with a training room on your left-hand side and a small dining room on your right. One thing I like is that the two guild halls, as well as the inn, all have their own layouts, as opposed to sharing the exact same floor plan in Oblivion. It makes each of the buildings stand out more and establish their own identity. It gives players more reason to explore and see the ways in which the dev team decorated each of these unique locations. The crafting hub in the southwest corner of the city has a really good layout to it, with all the stations relatively close to one another, making it easy to do your daily crafting riths. It doesn't feel too open or too spread out, and there's a good level of clutter and decoration as well. As we start to move east across the city, we'll pass by the various guild trader stalls lining the interior wall and the gate leading to the city's harbor. Sitting upon the southern bridge crossing the Nibbin River is the new player home, Water's Edge. This is a completely new player house, an original design made just for ESO, as opposed to Oblivion's Leyawiin house, which was closer to the city's center. For fans of housing in ESO, this might be a really good house. One thing that I like is that the rooms aren't too open, which makes it easier to fill in without having too much blank space. Water's Edge is broken into two different structures on either side of the bridge, with a terrace connecting these two parts of the house. Having such a nice open terrace and balcony makes for some great views of the city. Since we're on the playtest server, I opted to buy the furnished version of the house, just to give a sense of how it looks once filled in. One thing to note is that some of the furniture from this chapter seems to have Khajiit influences, reminding me of some of the seats and benches that we saw back in the Elsewhere chapter a couple years ago. Given that Blackwood sits between Elsewhere and Blackmarsh, it would make a lot of sense to have Leyawiin be this really cool melting pot of these different races, and have it be reflected in its furniture and decorations. If we move upriver to the northern part of the city, we'll enter the city's slums. While the rest of the city is built up and relatively elegant, this one part of town is the exception. There's not too much to see in this corner of the city, aside from some very depressed townsfolk and beggars. Just past this, however, is the Outlaws refuge for the city. This is a really cool location to go through. The architecture and layout reminded me a lot of the castles and undercrofts from Oblivion. Specifically, it reminded me of having to traverse the secret passages in Castle Cheydinhal. From wine cellars and storage rooms, this was a really well-designed location, and its winding corridors and dim lighting really made it feel like a hideaway. It can be a bit of a walk to actually reach the merchants and fences if you enter from inside the city walls, but I thought it was more than worth it that first time around. Finally, across the river, we have the city's eastern entrance, the guard tower and barracks, and most importantly, Castle Leyawiin itself. I love the design of the castle. It feels really fitting for a count and countess. The amount of carpeting, the paintings, and statues really help to portray a noble setting. The layout feels a little bit more open and grand, and you feel absolutely tiny as you walk through it. The upper floors and the noble quarters are restricted, so you won't be able to explore the castle in its entirety. However, you'll still be able to explore parts of the second floor and various hallways to really see the different furnishings and wall ornaments that they made for this expansion. The castle, like many buildings in Leyawiin, is a little bit more dimly lit, which plays well with a lot of the red and gold carpeting and tapestries that you see. It gives the interiors this really warm feeling and feels very inviting as a result. One thing I do miss about Oblivion is the guard armor. Blackwood's guard armor just doesn't have that same feeling to me personally. It does play well into ESO's Imperial style, as well as a mix of Akaviri styling that we've seen in the game, but I guess I'm just much more used to the traditional raiments and simple helmets from Oblivion's city guards. In the end, I really like ESO Blackwood's take on Leyawiin. To me, it feels like a really good mix of old and new. They didn't change the shape of the city's walls, but instead reorganized some of the buildings within in order to make better use of the space that they had. There's less open space, making the city feel much more like a city with tighter walkways and alleys, different market stalls, and greenery. There's always a balancing act to finding the right amount of decoration, clutter, and even structures, and I think they found a really good balance here. The same goes for interiors. The clutter and decoration is really well done, and helps to sell Leyawiin as a major city and affluent trade hub, which we really didn't get to see from Oblivion's portrayal of it. In the late 3rd era, Leyawiin feels like a city in decline. In the 2nd era, it feels like a city in its prime. But of course, you'll get to explore more of Leyawiin in ESO Blackwood, when it releases on June 1st on PC and Mac, and June 8th on consoles. More so, I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys think of this version of Leyawiin, and can't wait to see the city really filled in with more players at launch. If you'd like to see more ESO content, check out my streams at twitch.tv/0periodproductions, where I'm a member of the official ESO stream team. I stream ESO at least twice a week, and I'll be streaming even more of it when Blackwood releases. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.